welcome to today's webinar, The New Sustainability Advantage, the Business Case Benefits of a Triple Bottom Line. They're joining us today. TUSE is delighted to have with us Bob Willard, prolific speaker and author of The New Sustainability Advantage that you've seen on the 2 Degrees Book Club. Before we actually begin, I'm going to be giving you a few technical instructions for this webinar. If you have any problems with the technology or audio, please use the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen to send a message. Host from the drop-down menu, your message, and then I'll get back to you. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll also hold a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. To do this, type a question into the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, and then press send. If you have to connect through your phone, please use the chat box to contact me for details. Finally, for those of you who entered into our book draw, we'll be doing the winners at the end of the session. That out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Bob. Bob?
Thanks a lot, and I'm looking forward to this. I also want to say thank you for all the work you did to make this happen, the posting of the blogs, the organizing of the book draw, and all of your preparation for this webinar. So thank you much. This is really great, and I'm looking forward to having a bit of a dialogue with some of the folks that are on the phone, prompted by some of the slides that I'll use as sort of a context for the discussion. Vanessa said, if you've got questions as they go along, don't be shy. Don't hold them back until the end of the session. Just put them into the chat box, and Vanessa will help me do justice to them as we move through this. So we'll just take a few minutes and go through some of the highlights of the book that some of you have already had a chance to get acquainted with. It's the latest book, which is recalibration of the bottom line benefits of a company paying attention to their environmental and social aspects of their operation more than they might have before, and how that can positively impact their economic part of their operation. So I'm going to go through a couple of frameworks and kind of give you a little bit more context for some of what you may have seen in the book. To start off, first of all, with this question of how we'd know sustainability if we saw it, and especially from a business perspective, what we really would think of when we're thinking of sustainability in a business or corporate context. So this is one metaphor, the three-legged stool, for how we portray the 3 components that are usually referred to when we talk about sustainability. Some of you may be familiar with the Venn diagram of overlapping circles, or the nested dependencies diagram. But the 3-legged stool with the economic, environmental, and social or equity aspects, the 3 E's, is one way of portraying it in the business community, or the 3 P's with the profits, planet, and people aspect. Very often, rather than calling it sustainability, it's referred to as the triple bottom line, with other titles as well that are emerging. Green, although it has strong roots on the environmental side, also has morphed into an umbrella term for the entire stool. Corporate social responsibility, same thing. Environmental, social, and governance, ESG, is an acronym that seems to be gaining a lot of traction in the business community. It's used actually more than the word sustainability as well. So the challenge for us is to help businesses understand that by paying attention to the environmental leg of the stool, they can improve their profits, and the people, equity, social leg of the stool will also help them, if they're smart about how they approach that, protect their social license to operate and also contribute to their profits. So the overview of the language around sustainability. I also, in one of my blogs, talked about the 5-stage sustainability journey that companies normally go through as they start to connect with these themes. Obviously, the first couple of steps are the ones that they're driven to by regulators so that they comply with the people, that is to say the labor and human rights regulations in whatever jurisdiction they're operating in. Environmental and pollution control regulations as well. Most companies have gone beyond that because they realize they can take advantage of the so-called low-hanging fruit of sustainability, which is saving money on their energy, on their water, on their waste, and on their materials bills. Some of them have made commitments to actually bake all of these ideas into the culture and management systems of their operation and integrate sustainability into their business strategies. The discussion of the journey also acknowledges that some companies actually don't go through those first 4 stages. They start and they end in stage 5 because they're fed by or led by people who have very, very strong personal values around these things, and it requires them to be responsible in the way in which they treat their people, their community, their environmental impacts, etc. But most companies would essentially go through the first 4 stages. And a lot of challenge that we have is to get comfortable with the gap between stage 3 and stage 4 and what's in it for them if they decided to go further than they already have on this sustainability journey, and that leads us to being able to justify that and the business case. One of the interesting things is that there are very unusual pressures on business these days to do more than they're already doing. And I want to use a couple of quotes from Harvard Business Review articles in the last couple of years to help you understand what I mean by that. The first one is an article that came out in 2010 with a very interesting title. The word imperative is not a trivial word in the business community. And what this article is saying that something's happening out there. They say the last 10 years, I think it's more like the last 5 to 10 years. But public, you and me, and governments are getting uneasy about the 4 issues that you see in bold there. Change, despite denials to the contrary, is definitely happening. Industrial pollution, been around the last 150, 170 years, ever since the Industrial Revolution. Food safety, food security, closely tied to water safety, water security, is a relative newcomer, but certainly very top of mind for a lot of people. And natural resource depletion, which is essentially all natural resources, trees, fish, oil, gas, soil, minerals, rare earth minerals, everything. We're getting to the point where we're running out of the easy availability of those things, so we're having to use more and more risky techniques to have access to them, or we're simply running out of them. When you get scarce materials, the price goes up. When the price goes up, that becomes a business issue. So what this quote is saying, and what the article is saying, is that the expectation of companies these days is not only to do no harm in these areas, it's to actually proactively come up with solutions. That's a very, very different set of expectations for businesses. And if they don't step up to them, their so-called social license to operate with important stakeholders could be in jeopardy. So this is the downside. This is the do it or else message. There's also a companion message, which Michael Porter and Daniel Kramer authored in the Harvard Business Review, where they talked about creating shared value. And they acknowledged that capitalism is a little bit stressed these days because of people being a little uneasy about the impacts of this. But also acknowledges that companies are smart about how they create this shared value. That is to say, providing value to the community as well as value for itself that it can reap. We can come up with a more responsible form of capitalism. And if that works well, then we can unleash a wave of innovation and growth, and that would be fantastic. And essentially what they're saying is this is the good news. So not only are you under pressure as a company to do more than you're already doing, if you step up to that, this could actually work out pretty well. So the upside is here, create shared value. The downside is do it or else. Question here from Lars. What are the key drivers for companies getting to stage 5, purpose and passion in the sustainability journey when they've started in the pre-compliance stage? the key drive courage. Essentially, they're a little uneasy that if they made that leap, they would probably do some damage to their company. They'd slow it down. They'd lose track of what the company is there to do in the first place. And I think we have to acknowledge that they need to get to stage 4 before they get to stage 5. That is to say, they need to be able to see for themselves that being more responsible is not a sacrifice. It's actually an advantage. And then they'll have an opportunity to repurpose their company. And the difference between stage 5 and stage 4 is that the company at stage 5 level has explicit purposes to not only have a robust bottom line, but also to contribute, give back to, remunerate society and the environment. So it's a bit of a different business model. Most for-profit companies get really twitchy when you start to talk about that, because usually their experience has been that that's very expensive, that it's going to slow them down. So we have to get them to stage 4 to help them realize that it won't, and then they'll have the courage, perhaps, to repurpose themselves. Hope that helps. Okay, so with that as background, I just want to give you a slide that I use quite often in my presentations that, to me, is a very important reframing slide for how we approach companies on this topic of sustainability. So if you were to approach the office of this gentleman who seems to be a little bit overworked, perhaps a little stressed by piles of priorities on either side of his desk, all of which he's probably being driven by, or some of which he's probably measured on, and which his career depends on, and perhaps his evaluation of remuneration depends on. So if we come along and we say, knock, knock, would you like some sustainability today? It's a tough sell, because it doesn't intuitively fit with any of these other priorities. So at best, they might kind of put at the bottom of one of the piles, reassure that they'll get to it because they know it's really important, but frankly, they never will. So for those of us that are trying to get the attention of business people, I only discourage positioning it as another goal, especially if you're trying to get them from stage 3 to stage 4. Stage 5, you can get away with positioning it as another goal. Stage 4, not so much. So essentially what I'm suggesting is we don't do that. And what we do is we talk about sustainability strategies, not goals, strategies. Strategies that will help them get their other priorities sooner and better than they otherwise would have been able to, that can win the talent wars. They can be more innovative. They can do all of the things in both of those columns better than they otherwise would have been able to. These are enablers of their current priorities that are driving them nuts, as opposed to one more thing to worry about. So I think if we're going to do that, we have to be able to show that, yeah, this actually will help. So take that little thing on the top left-hand corner called profit. That brings us to the fundamental question, which is, can companies actually make more money? They pay attention to the two legs of the stool that we labeled as environmental and social legs. Happily, the answer is a resounding yes, they can. They absolutely can. When I wrote the book, first book in 2002, The Sustainability Advantage, I said it was a very compelling business case. When I recalibrated it in the book that came out this year, The New Sustainability Advantage, very clever title, essentially what it shows is that, my goodness, you can make a lot more profit. So that's what I'm going to give you a one-slide summary of, which is the business case that's outlined in the book and some of the other materials that some of you may have accessed. So let's start off then with the framework that we are going to show this business case around. And as you can see, it's the profit and loss statements. It's the income statement. It's one that companies are very familiar with. Executives understand this, and therefore it behooves us to acknowledge that our case can be built around the same framework. So what I did, just to help you understand the methodology here, this is not rocket science, and I sure did not make this up. All I did was I went to the literature, the research that's done by academics, the research that's done by consultants, the studies that are done by consulting companies, the press releases that are given out by companies, And I teased out all of that material, the areas of benefit that companies could reap if they were smart about how they approach some of these sustainability issues. And I separated them into 7 buckets, 7 different kinds of benefits. And that is I monetized them, I quantified them, I normalized them to revenue and came up with percent improvements that were possible for companies that had done what they had done. Okay, well, fine. If that's possible for them, then it might be possible for other companies. So essentially, what I then did was build a business simulator, which allows us to plug in the numbers for some basic financial numbers for any company and extrapolate from that what that company might be able to come up with. So here are the opportunities benefits, the things that they can reap. They can make more revenue. They can increase the amount of money, the top line money that they make. They can take advantage of that low-hanging fruit, money on their energy bill or waste bill or water and materials bill. Water I lumped in with materials because it's not that expensive. It's important. It's just not financially expensive. And there's, which are kind of the icing on the cake. This is the secret sauce in the whole recipe here. Is productivity. You get your employees really pumped about this and magic happens. Essentially, when companies' values start to resonate with the employees' values, they start to become much, much more engaged, and they will find ways to help the company capture all of these benefits that will blow you away. Whether it's through green teams or volunteering or whatever it is, it's amazing. And reduced employee turnover, less attrition, which can save the company a lot of money as well. So those are the opportunities, 6 of them. There were a whole lot of things that the company could be in jeopardy about if it didn't step up to this, and I called those risks. And frankly, there are only 2 reasons any company ever does anything. It's capture the opportunities or to avoid risks of not doing those things. So I've extrapolated 7 different risks to revenue the company could be exposed to if it doesn't do these sustainability-related activities, and 7 contributors to increased expenses if it doesn't do these things. So the downside risks and the upside opportunities. Then what I did was I did some estimates as to what might be possible in the next 3 to 5 years for any company if it were simply to do what other companies have already done. Technologies, regulations, just take the best practices of companies that have already done these things and do them. How good could this be? They increase their revenue by at least 9%, at least 9%, by attracting customers who want to deal with their kind of company, by coming up with green products, by providing services rather than products, many, many creative ways of doing that. And save energy, reduce energy as in electricity, energy as in fuel. There are at least 10 ways they could do that, and if they were smart about how they do it, they could reduce their energy bill by at least 75%. There are companies that have got 80, 90, 100%. Actually, they're saving so much energy and co-generating so much, they're actually converting their expense into a revenue stream. They can reduce their waste costs and their material costs by 20 and 10%. They can increase the productivity of their employees by at least 2%. The cost of turnover could go down by at least 25%. And if they were able to do all of those things, their profit would go up by 51 to 81%. So what if a company today is, let's say, 10% of its revenue, the profit would be 15 to 18% profit. So it's an increase on the existing profit. So you would think that for a guy that's trying to put this thing together, would want a big number in that 51 to 81% box. The irony is that I had to work very, very hard to keep it under 100%. Under 100%. And why would I feel so compelled to keep it under 100%? Because nobody would believe it if it got over 100%. In fact, even 51 to 81% looks pretty incredible to some folks. So my biggest challenge, and this is so ironic, my biggest challenge was to get those other numbers down far enough so that I keep the bottom line number as low as it is. for example, increased productivity should be more like 20 to 50% increase in productivity. I just kept factoring it down to 2%. Increased revenue could be a lot higher. I just kept factoring it down. So what we've got here is a conservative, it's a lowball possibility for companies if they got serious about this, how good it could be in the next 3 to 5 years. And side, if they decided to take a pass on it, they could be jeopardizing their profit. It could go down by 16 to 36% because of the risks to revenue and to expenses that I alluded to before. And in fact, there was so much capability of getting more from this that I creamed off some of the savings from waste and some of the savings from materials, and I put them into a rotating pool of capital called the Sustainability Capital Reserve, which is used to fund new projects, and when those savings come in from those new projects, it goes back into the rotating pool of capital, and so it's a self-funding kind of thing. So essentially what we're talking about is a pretty compelling business case here, which I don't think most businesses really understand. They normally think of the energy, the waste, and the materials ones as the big swing, and they are. They just haven't put together the whole business case quite as holistically as this is trying to do. In case you're wondering where that 51 to 81% comes from, I have the numbers for a small professional services company with 6 people and a large manufacturing distribution company with 3,000 to 4,000 people. You can scale it up to 30,000 to 300,000. It doesn't matter. The logic is exactly the same. It's extremely scalable. And you can see at the bottom the increased profit and increased profit at risk. The numbers that you saw in the previous slide are associated with those two size companies. And the reality is that no company, if you belong to a company, your company isn't going to look like the small one. It's not going to look like the large one. You've got different numbers there. So the simulator allows you to take the numbers in the white column, your numbers, your actual numbers, what you have in revenue and energy and materials and profit and so on, and number of employees, plug those into the simulator, and you will see what's possible for you given your financial realities. And that brings you to the resources. So if you care about this and you're trying to have a conversation with folks about this, are welcome to dip into some of the resources that are available. So obviously there's a book, and there's a sort of a movie version of the book or me talking about it in more detail, which is on a DVD, which you can access either the physical DVD or you can access online. The dashboard version of the business case on my website is free. You just plug in your numbers, and it'll show you as you change the sliders to indicate the percent improvement that you think might be possible for your company on each of the percents they saw on the previous slide. As you see that, you can see the impact that it'll have on your potential bottom line profit. If you change the assumptions behind the assumptions, you can work with the downloadable, free, open source Excel worksheets and see what's possible for you. Change the assumptions to change the language. If you prefer a PowerPoint format, you can subscribe to the slides. There are 700 slides in this, 580 of which have to do with the business case. So there's backup to the backup to the backup, a lot of examples. Just to round it out, if you're looking on how to sell it, how to talk the language of business, and how to handle objections, the next sustainability wave might be helpful there. And if you're an internal change champion without a lot of position power and you want to know how to do something you care about, but you're not in the suite, the Sustainability Champions Guidebook and its DVD might be of use to you. And there's some slides, about 120 of them, that are back up to all of that as well. So what I'm trying to help you understand is that we don't have to reinvent this stuff. There's a lot of good stuff out there. This is just the tip of the iceberg on the good tools that are available, and I encourage you to browse those. And some of them, especially the dashboard and the worksheets, which are free, might be of use to you. In fact, I've had a couple of messages from folks in the European Union asking if I've got versions of those which are for small and sized companies in the EU, and I don't. But the beauty of it is that they are deliberately open source, free, and changeable. So you can adjust them and create new models for yourself, brand them, sell them, I don't care. And that might be useful to you. So that's a quick review of not only what the business case looks like, but resources that can help you perhaps be more effective as a sustainability champion using some of those resources as well. Questions?
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Bob. I think you can actually see some of the questions that have popped up in the Q&A. There's also a few in the chat box that I'll be asking you. So first, I'll go into Ruth's question here. Primarily, you're talking about eco-efficiency and sustainable business case. What about the social side of sustainability?
A lot harder, much more difficult, which is why it's smart to lump all of that together with the environmental side. There are advantages on the social side. Much of that ties to the engine behind the increased employee productivity. So we turn employees loose in the community where they're working on things that they care about. It could be energy, it could be working in the schools, it could be working on homelessness. It could be something that they care about and the company also cares about. That energy that they bring to their volunteerism returns with them when they come back into the organization in their day job. Magic happens. So a lot of that happens. It's just that our metrics around that are just awful. We just don't have good metrics yet. On the social side, so most of what I've tried to show here are the more environmentally related ones. When you get into social as in reputation with your important stakeholders, as in social capital, you can connect that to the revenue line at the top. You can connect that to the employee line and the ability to attract and retain employees. And, of course, there are risks as well, which I didn't explode into all of the risks, but some of those risks are that your reputation could start to look bad in the eyes of some important stakeholders, and that will impact their inclination to buy from you, to buy your shares, to have anything to do with you.
Great, thanks for that. For the next question, you've given numbers and figures that you've presented. What hinders companies starting with developing and implementing sustainability strategies?
Yeah, what a great question. That's really a question that was screaming in my head after I wrote the very first book. I couldn't believe that the business case was as good as it was. I checked my numbers so many times. I just couldn't believe it was that good. So the question that was screaming in my head was, if it's this good, why isn't everybody doing it? So what I decided to do is do some rigorous research on what the heck's getting in the way of companies embracing this as smart business strategies. So I did that as a doctorate, frankly, at the University of Toronto, and that second book that you saw, the Next Sustainability Wave, is really the answer to that. It's what the inhibitors are and how to overcome them. Frankly, the summary of that years of research is one word, and that's mindset. It's inconceivable to most business leaders that paying attention to this stuff could actually be good. They are so preconditioned by their experience of going from stage 1 to stage 2, the pre-compliance to compliance, that which are very bureaucratic and usually very expensive steps to make, because most of the environmental stuff, especially, is end of pipe, which is very expensive. So when you mention green or environment to them, they have a mindset that says, oh my goodness, this is going to be expensive. And it's going to be bureaucratic, and businesses hate both of those things, expense and bureaucracy. So we have to kind of ease them into that beyond compliance phase, and they start to actually get it, that, oh, okay, so we can do the right thing and actually help the company. And what I'm trying to help them understand is if you're doing it for business reasons, that's fine. It just turns out that it's also the environment and society. But I don't think they understand the potential. If they didn't, if they read the book and they say, yeah, 51, 81%, but for who? Were these companies in Europe or is this other jurisdictions, or is it in my sector, or is it my size, and so on. And by the time they finish, what they want is a business case for their company. And that's why I've really tried to make it very accessible, the business case simulator very accessible with the dashboard and the worksheets, so that we can help them see what's in it for them. And use the business case simulator not as an answer sheet, but as a catalyst for a dialogue with them, saying, look, the evidence is that some companies are able to make this much or improve this much. What do you think we can, from your experience, knowing what you know, and so on? And by the time you're finished, it's not your business case, it's theirs. And they will be blown away. I mean blown away. How much is possible. If they're serious about it, if they're not just going to dabble in the margins, but they're actually going to do something, they will be amazed.
All right, thanks for that, Bob. So I go to our next question, and I'm keeping time here, so we'll just kind of scoot through these. Does the Sustainability Champions Guidebook address the balanced scorecard as a key tool in implementing the strategy behind shifting focus into value?
Directly, all of the elements of the balanced scorecard are included in the business case. What I think it does is it goes into a little bit more depth than the four aspects of the normal balanced scorecard do. There have been some accountants that have connected the dots between the benefits that I talk about and the balanced scorecard, and that's great. But yeah, the balanced scorecard really acknowledges that there is a set of leading indicators as opposed to lagging indicators that companies need to pay attention to, their relationships with their customers, and of course this is all about customer relationship and social capital, and making sure that your important stakeholders are happy about what you're doing. And it also gets into the investment in employees too, the learning aspect and investing in them and increasing their capacity to make a difference. So yes, all of those elements are there, and it's a wonderful way of reframing these benefits in a way that some companies are more comfortable shaping them.
To the next question. What specific actions are companies taking to realize the benefits which you've shown? For example, in the construction industry.
Okay, in the construction industry, there are a couple of forces going on. First of all construction companies have a very, very strong culture of safety. And safety is not a bad cornerstone on which to layer some of these sustainability things. Just as quality is in other companies, just as lean manufacturing is in some companies, rather than saying this is something new and different, you can coattail or piggyback some of those existing themes. So building on a culture of safety, care for employees, that kind of thing, is a nice platform for construction companies. The thing is that the nature of the things that they are constructing is becoming more and more critical for those people that are asking them to do it. So whether they're building bridges and roads for municipalities, which are infrastructure type things, being able to do those in a way that makes them be more accessible, durable, especially given the severe weather events that many locations in the world are subjected to these days, that starts to creep into the equation more than it used to. Buildings, of course, whether it's LEED standard or other standards for green buildings, construction industries, architects are starting to get much, much more comfortable with all of those approaches and technologies. And in fact, so much so that the price differential of doing those kinds of things has come down dramatically. So it looks like more to a 3 to 5% differential than a 17 to 20% differential, which it did 5 to 10 years ago for LEED standard buildings. So what we're finding is the construction industry, it's got a heck of a lot of inertia in it. My goodness, they just are very comfortable doing things the way they've always done them. So it really has to be a sort of a demand-driven change. That is to say that the clients for whom they are performing whatever construction that they are doing require them to use these different approaches. And they do it, they start to get much more comfortable with it, and it starts to build, and they become almost specialists in it. Some construction and architectural companies are only doing those kinds of buildings now. So the construction industry is a very, very, very key player in all of this.
Great, thanks for that, Bob. Our next question. What are good examples, in your opinion, of companies that have been able to develop truly sustainable business models? One of my favorites is Patagonia.
Yeah, Patagonia is a great example. What you'll find is that stage 5 companies are, and Patagonia I would say would be one of them. The name founder and the name of the company are almost interchangeable. So Yvan Chouinard and what he's doing with Patagonia is fantastic. Ray Anderson and what he did with Interface Carpet is terrific. Anita Roddick and the Body Shop before they got bought out and slipped down to stage 3. Jerry's Ice Cream before they got bought out and slipped down to stage 3. But, you know, Seventh Generation, Jeffrey Hollander, lots of organizations have very, very strong business models. That is to say, ways of running a business that require them, purpose them to be not careful about their environmental and social impacts and footprints, but also to proactively try to make a constructive difference to the environment, regenerative kinds of things, as well as society, build society. So, yeah, they're special people. There's a group of companies that some of you may have heard of, which are called benefit or for-benefit corporations, or B Corps. B Corps, which are starting to catch on like crazy in North America. There are now 12 states in the U.S. that allow companies to charter themselves, so that they are required to pay attention to the environmental, social, and economic aspects of their operation, not just the economic parts. There are about 60 of us in Canada. I'm a B Corp. Patagonia is a B Corp. There are more companies that are saying, you know, this business model makes sense for me, and they are becoming certified benefit corporations. Actually, even though Unilever owns Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, Ben & Jerry's last week became a certified B Corp. So they have reconfirmed their commitment to 3 aspects of sustainability, not just the economic one. So there are some exciting things going on the business model side. Forum for the Future is working quite hard on that. And there are some other organizations that are looking at how to actually design a business so that it will be a sustainable organization.
So we have a quick question here from Sergio. Yes, do you have any examples of companies in Brazil, or I'm guessing outside of the U.S. as well?
Oh, goodness, this is so embarrassing. I should know that because I've been to Brazil a couple of times. There is a juice company in Brazil whose name I can't remember. Or something like that.
I think we just got a member that just said Natura as well on the chat box. Yeah.
Natura, which has a very, very good reputation around these kinds of things. The challenge is to be able to address all these things in parallel. It's not just being really, really good on the environmental front or really, really good on the social front. It's the whole package. And some companies, to their credit, are really way ahead of the other companies on one or two of the aspects of their operation. The challenge is to be able to do justice to what's possible in all 3 areas and to be able to cost justify it. And that's why, from my humble perspective, the business simulator is a great reinforcer for doing the right thing, because if you can show that you will see these benefits and start to quantify what those benefits might be from going further than you already have, that it makes it easier for internal senior champions in the business to justify to their colleagues doing more than they already are. And I think if you are what I sustainability champion, an advocate, a champion of sustainability, you need to be careful that if you convert or get some other people in an organization all excited about this the way you are, that you don't leave them naked, because they start to run around talking how important environmental and social stuff is, and they don't have the numbers to back up that this is a good thing for the company, they're going to get marginalized by their colleagues. This could be a career-limiting situation. So we need to provide them with the ammunition to be able to quantify in a way that the game of business requires them to, that this is not only a good thing for the environment and society, this is going to be a great thing for the company.
And we have a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to keep rolling along. I'm going to ask a few more, and then we'll start wrapping up for the day. So have you worked with any companies in the food industry? Besides Ben & Jerry's, are there other food companies you would characterize as particularly sustainable?
Well, there are some companies, most of them are the smaller ones. The big guys are starting to really get very, very, very engaged in this. Food companies are in the eye of the storm. They get hit with all of the issues. They get hit with the sourcing, the supply chain stuff, and the conditions in their supply chain and the length of their supply chains. They get hit with packaging issues. They get hit with nutrition issues. They get hit with everything. I spoke to a Food Marketing Institute session in Washington last month, and I was quite impressed with the extent to which they were, first of all, acknowledging the challenges and the evidence that they're actually stepping up to it. The beverage companies are especially challenged because of the water issue and nutrition issues associated with their products in many cases, packaging issues. So they're not hiding their heads in the sand anymore. I'm a little hesitant because I really am not an expert in that area to name the best ones. And nobody's got a halo. Let me tell you, you can find lots of warts as well as beauty marks on the faces of these companies. So it's just that some of them seem to be a little bit more successful than others. Most of the ones that are really focused on local food, organic food, seem to be ahead of the pack.
On to our next question after here. I guess quite similar to the Brazilian question. Do you know any companies in the MENA, so Middle East and North African region, which uses the sustainability principles?
No.
Okay. I guess we'll kind of see if any of our members have any insights into that might be quite helpful.
Just to make sure that short answer is evidence of my ignorance of the companies, not that there aren't any, I just don't know of them.
Okay. So on to the next one. Besides an increase in the companies doing so, what trends and developments in sustainability strategizing do you foresee in the coming years? Yeah,
the landscape is very, very unsettling for most companies. They used to be able to pretty well hunker down and just clean up their own act, and that was good enough. Now becoming accountable for their supply chain. That's driving them nuts. The conditions in their suppliers and their suppliers' conditions are becoming something that they're being held accountable for. Then you get their end of the value chain is what you and I use their products, and now they're becoming accountable for what happens to those products, not only while we're using them and the footprints associated with those uses, but also what happens to them when we dispose of them. So they've got the whole value chain, which they are now, used to be all externalities, they're coming home to roost, not only the carbon part, but everything else. So that's the first huge shift, the accountability for supply chain. The second one has to do with the accountability for their ecosystem's impacts. For the first time in the history of any corporation, PUMA, put out their environmental profit and loss statement, which in effect was they gave themselves a bill for the damage that they had done to ecosystems from their operations in 2011, 145 million euros. So this is not loose change. This is a big deal. And they also acknowledged that they hadn't been quite as complete as they need to be, because they looked at really basically 4 impacts on ecosystems and know that there are a lot more. So they're going to extend that, and now they want to include social. So essentially what used to be externalities are creeping back into the responsibility of companies to address. This is huge. It's making companies really, really nervous. They know that their social license to operate depends on how well they step up to these things, and it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Now they're ready to sit still long enough to listen as to how they can do these things in a way that's going to work for them. So the supply chain pressures, the ecosystems pressures, the fact is that most companies recognize that they need to change their business model, not because they're good guys, but because this is a question of survival. And those are powerful market forces. I love it.
I'm going to give one last question, and then we'll move into closing in, if that's okay with you, Bob.
Sure.
So, last one here. Would you consider the integration/crossover of disciplines, i.e. architecture and production system sustainability, say with an industrial environment, to be a key way of furthering the benefits you have discussed in this presentation?
Yes, that's just one of them. Absolutely. The more synthesized, collaborative, we get all of these various disciplines that have been painfully siloed in the past together, the better. We have so many things to do, and none of us can do them alone. So the collaborative approach, the breaking down of turf wars, the energizing of a lot of good thinking is absolutely required to make the innovations that we need. This is a blank slate for innovation. It's pretty clear that we have thoroughly screwed up the world using all the ways that we have got away with for the last 150 years. We need to reinvent the economy so that it works for us. And there are so many creative ways that are being done all over the world. I mean, the transition towns effort that started in the UK, it's now all over North America. It's a wonderful way of trying to come up with resilient models for communities. It's fantastic. The Business Alliance for Local Living Economies that started in California, actually started just off the coast of Seattle, and it spread through the West and all over North America. Similar kinds of things. Action is happening at the local level. You know, you can do international stuff and you kind of get disappointed, not much is happening. Well, I think we have to change our expectations and roll up our sleeves and do more things at the local level. That's where the action is, that's where the creativity is, and that's where it matters, because it touches people. And I think as you folks are looking for ways to make a difference, you shouldn't wait for other people to give you a flashing green light. You just need to get on with it. And understand that the sense of urgency is pretty high right now. We can't wait for the experts to invent these things ourselves. So a lot of opportunity for collaboration between various disciplines and solutions that we would never have dreamed possible.
Fantastic. So much for answering all the questions that have come in. And I know we haven't gotten to all of them today, but we have a log, so we'll be able to get answers to your questions, to attendees' questions at a later date. So now that we've closed the Q&A and the presentation itself, I'm going to go ahead and announce the names of our winners for the book draw. So we've included entries all up to October 30th, and the final outcome was randomly selected. So Christine Eckers, Kimberly Taylor McFarland, Paul Holmes, Bill Rice, and Jason Sandman are our winners. So congratulations to them, and I'll be sending out an email with the follow-up instructions. So with that bit out of the way, I'd like to thank all of the attendees for participating today, for firstly entering the contest, joining along in the book club, and for the questions, comments, and ideas that you've given us today. And a big thanks to Bob for his great presentation and all the work he's done on 2 degrees. So much, Bob.
It's a pleasure. And if those questions, if you want to send me the questions, I'll be happy to answer them, and you can flip them back to the people that asked them.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll send those over to you.
Okay.
So all right, for the rest of our attendees, the recording and the relevant info will be posted shortly on the Managing Sustainability group on 2 degrees. So many thanks again to everyone, and have a happy Halloween and a happy day.
So thanks again.